Thank you, everybody. All right, so welcome. I hope if you just came in to take a nap after lunch, that's okay, because that's what I'm going to do after this. So yeah, my talk today is called Rapid Prototyping Using the Unreal 4 Marketplace. So I'm going to be talking through some of the benefits, tips, and things to keep in mind when using marketplace content, specifically AAA level content when doing your rapid prototyping. With the influx of easily downloadable engines and easily accessible marketplaces, it's changed some of the paradigms when it comes to prototyping and doing early development in your title. I'm a game designer. I'll go through some of my background, but this isn't going to be a super hyper technical talk. It's pretty high level, but I will leave some time for Q&A in the end. If you have any specific questions, I'm not going to delve too much down into the specific blueprints and the assets and stuff like this. But I am Christian Allen. I'm the Unreal Evangelist for North America at Epic Games. So essentially what I do at Epic is I travel around the country and try to explain to people what an Unreal Evangelist does at Epic Games, especially when I run into other people from Epic who go, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Don't worry about it. It's very important." But really what I do a lot of talks like this, I do a lot of traveling and presentation, and then on the business development side, what I do is I focus on indie developers in North America shipping on Unreal 4. As you may know, our business model is all based on royalties for games, so the engine's free to download, free to use, and then once you ship your product and start generating revenue, we take a royalty from that. So that's how we generate money, and so my goal is to help indie game developers ship games and actually generate revenue from those games so that we can actually make money off it. So nice symbiotic relationship. This is my contact information on Twitter at Cerelan. LinkedIn, you can find me Christian Allen Designer. On both of those, I am Christian Allen the game designer, not Christian Allen the MMA fighter. I know I look like an MMA fighter, but probably if the profile picture has the shirt off, that's probably not me. And then if you message me on Facebook, I'm going to ignore you. I say that every single time, and then every single time when I'm done, I get like 5 Facebook invites. So you don't need to see pictures of my kids. So my background, because I have a weird title like Unreal Evangelist, I do like to qualify that I have been in the games industry for quite a while. I started as a modder in the late 90s working on Rainbow Six. Got hired at Red Storm Ubisoft where I started as an assistant designer. I was a mission scripter on Ghost Recon. Worked my way up to lead designer and creative director on the Ghost Recon franchise, focusing on the Xbox. After that, I moved on to Bungie, where I was design lead on Halo Reach. And then after that, I spent some time at Warner Brothers, where I kind of bounced around, but did work on the publishing side for Mad Max, and also did some of the early concept and prototyping on what eventually became Shadows of Mordor, so Lord of the Rings. After that, I ran my own studio called Cerelan LLC here out of Seattle. We ended up shipping 3 different titles. Takedown was shipped on PC and Xbox 360, XBLA. Epsilon was a Steam Early Access title, and Hotel Blind was a virtual reality simulation of being a blind person that also shipped on Steam. It was the first Unreal 4 virtual reality title to run at a steady 120 frames per second, so very proud of that. While I was doing that, I also had my beard break into Hollywood. I did transmedia and game design for the After Earth movie franchise. As you all know, After Earth is a huge mega hit. Has anybody seen After Earth with Will Smith and Jaden Smith? Okay, well that's how big of a success it was. You don't really need to go see it. Yeah, anyway, that didn't work out too well. So now I'm at Epic, helping other people ship games. So first I want to touch on a little bit of the Unreal Marketplace and kind of what it is. If you're familiar with the Unity Asset Store, Unreal Marketplace is similar to that. It's assets that's tailored to use in the Unreal Engine. So there's kind of 3, I actually have a whole separate talk about using licensed content. But essentially you have engine-specific marketplaces like the Unity Store and the Unreal Marketplace. And then you have more general asset stores like TurboSquid, where you can go out and purchase content that may or may not be optimized for game development or for whatever you want to use it. But I'm going to be talking about assets specifically in the Unreal Marketplace today. So assets on the Unreal Marketplace, there's ton of different types of assets, whether it comes from pure art assets, which is what I'm going to be focusing on today, to blueprint packs using our blueprint scripting language, code plugins. There's all sorts of different content. We've had a big uptick in usage of the marketplace, both by developers that are consuming the content and developers that are actually selling marketplace content to other developers. Both for games, enterprise, TV, previs, various different things. So you should definitely check it out. The Unreal Marketplace is where we first tried out our new developer revenue split, where we tried out the 88% for developers and 12% for Epic. We launched that last year, and it was extremely successful, both from the developers who were quite happy with it, and the influx of high-quality content that we were getting coming over from other platforms. As you know, we carried that developer split forward into the Epic Games Store, and now have applied that to all digital sales on our platforms. So there are quite a few developers that are supplementing their revenue, either taking assets or things like blueprint systems, backend systems they built for the game, turning those into packages on the Unreal Marketplace. If you're interested in doing that, you can always reach out to me. We also have an FAQ on submission process. We do hand curate everything on the Epic Games Store for functionality and things like trademark violations and stuff like that. We have a review process and all that fun stuff, so you can check that out. And one of the things we did last year is we had a game called Paragon, which was a MOBA-style game that was out. I believe it came out in 2016, 2015, 2016. But it was going along, and for various different reasons, we decided we needed to shut it down. It wasn't generating enough revenue, and unfortunately for Paragon, we had this other game that came out in, late 17? It's 2019, right? So I might have my years off. Late 17, this other game came out. It was like this shooter where you jump out of a bus and like 100 people on an island. It's super popular. You can Google it, whatever it's called. So that did really well. We had to pull some resources off Paragon and assign them to Fortnite. But one of the cool things that we could do, because we are an engine developer and have a marketplace and generator on our assets, is we're able to take a lot of that Paragon content and put it up for free on the Unreal Marketplace. So any content that is listed under the Epic Games search, which here, if you go into your marketplace and go into browse and you click the little free button. The top button is the Epic Games content. All of that content's completely free, and it's licensed for anything that you want to do within the Unreal Engine. So you can download the characters, the materials, the effects, the sounds, whatever you want to use them for. However, those specific pieces of content are only licensed for use in Unreal Engine. Any content that you purchase off the marketplace is licensed for use anywhere. So if you actually see a material pack that you like on the Unreal Marketplace and you're developing a Unity game and you want to go purchase that and download it and export it and re-export it into Unity, you can do all that. The free content that we give away is specifically for Unreal developers. One of the other things that we started doing this year, or maybe late last year, is we started sponsoring packs for users. So we have 5 different packs of content, and actually this month I think we did 10, but we normally do 5, where we actually sponsor the content, pay the developer of that content, and then give it out for free to the content creators for that month. That's just a way, one, for us to reward content that we think is really useful to the community, and 2, obviously, to bring people in and just let them know that, hey, this marketplace is here, get some free content. If you download that free content during that month, again, you just go to this free tab and click on free for the month. You can see here this is all already shown as owned by me because this is my account and I logged in and purchased it at the beginning of the month, purchased it for free. But when you acquire that content, you own it in perpetuity. So if you get it during that month, just like the games we give away on Epic Games Store, you continue to own it. So it's a really good way. This image on the left of the vault is actually my vault, where I've been adding content like Advanced Cell Shader, Village Pack, Animal Variety Pack, all these different packs I've been adding. You can build up a library of content that you can use, so it's especially great for indie developers and students. And honestly, there's no reason why not to just go get that content and add it to your library. So, before I get into kind of the presentation of using the marketplace assets for rapid prototyping, I want to touch on the idea of the asset flip. So this is something that gets brought up a lot when I talk about marketplace content, is people go, well, there's this negative perception of asset flips. And the first thing I like to ask is anybody not familiar with what the kind of connotation of what an asset flip game is? Okay, there's a few folks. So asset flips are generally referred to, they're generally referring to kind of garbage games or clone games where it kind of came out around the time of when Flappy Bird got really big. There was a demo for one of the other engines called Bouncy Ball, and it was a tutorial that you could download and learn how to use. I think it was a side-scrolling game where there was a bouncing ball, and a very entrepreneurial-minded person downloaded that tutorial, made the ball bigger, colored it red, changed the title to Bouncy Red Ball, put it up on I think Google Marketplace, and made like an obscene amount of money overnight. And then a lot of other people thought, that's a really good idea, I should do that too. And so a lot of times now, if you see a major release, or big announce or something like that, you'll see a lot of kind of clones and Me Too's. They'll go out and they'll find assets that look similar to a style. They'll purchase those assets, basically use a default template, flip that around, throw it up on a store and sell it. And that's what's generally referred to when people say, this is an asset flip or that's an asset flip. That's kind of what people are generally talking about, but a lot of times that gets applied to other titles as well, where people see content in a game and they might recognize that it's from a marketplace and say, oh, that's asset flipping. And the example I use of how this can be good and how can this kind of bite you is that when you're using marketplace assets, the first thing I recommend is to be transparent about it. If your game gets popular enough and big enough, someone's going to dig through the files, someone's going to dig through the images, they're going to track it down, they're going to find it because people are interested and they're excited about your title. And there's nothing wrong with using marketplace assets, but being transparent and upfront about it is not a bad idea. But the way I like to think about marketplace assets is that you're enhancing the uniqueness of your game by allowing your art team to focus on the assets that you want to stand out. So if you're building an open world game set in the ancient Aztec civilization, and you've got a small team or a small amount of time or a small budget, if you have all three of those that are big, then great, you do whatever you want. But if it's the real world and you have actual limitations, using marketplace assets either from an art standpoint or a blueprint package standpoint to build out features can be really, really useful. But the way that you generally want to apply that is if you're building this, again, open world Aztec civilization, you want your art team to focus on what makes that game unique. So you're going to focus on the Aztec architecture. You're going to focus it on the character design, the unique things that make the Aztec civilization appealing as a game setting. And to do that, you can go out and do things like buy rocks, because having your art team build 150 variation of the rock that you have, or the tree that you have, or the tree bark, or the moss, might not be the best application of your time when you can focus on those hero assets that you want to have. And there's some other examples that I'll talk about too. But the example I like to use of when an asset flip can be good is Mr. Fusion. So has anybody not seen Back to the Future? Okay, good. Not young kids today. I had a bunch of high schoolers last week or week before, and I was talking about this, and I was like, oh, Mr. Fusion, from Back to the Future. And they're like, what are you talking about? But Mr. Fusion was in his scene at the end of Back to the Future. Doc comes back from the future, and he says, we have to go, save your kids in the future. And he's retrofitted the DeLorean with a fusion generator. So he pops open the hood, Mr. Fusion comes up. He has to grab some aluminum cans and banana peels, throws in Mr. Fusion, that powers the DeLorean, and he drives off. Well, this was a tiny little scene. It was a pickup scene that they put at the end of the movie. It was the famous line, where we're going, we don't need roads. But they needed a prop for what Mr. Fusion was. Mr. Fusion was just in the script, and it said Mr. Fusion. Mr. Fusion pops up. They put stuff in Mr. Fusion. And they didn't have a big budget for it, so the prop master of the movie went back into the props. I want to say it was 20th Century Fox, but I could be wrong. Dug through the prop closet and found this cool Mr. Fusion. And Mr. Fusion is actually from the movie Alien. So the scene on the left is the movie Alien from 1979, right before the alien xenomorph burst out of his chest, and Mr. Fusion was part of the kitchen, was hanging on the wall there. And Mr. Fusion showed up in Alien because Mr. Fusion was actually a Procter & Silex blender that you could buy at JCPenney. And it was their like 1980, it was released in like 78, but it was the 1980 blender because it was like the blender of the future. Hence the white plastic and the curviness. And so whoever did the set decoration for the Nostromo thought that it looked sci-fi, and then they used it, and then it sat in a warehouse, and then it got stuck on top of Mr. Fusion and reused. And the point that I bring this up is that nobody watching Back to the Future, I don't think ever has looked at it and gone, oh, that's that blender from Alien. Like, this totally ruined my immersion in this story. I hate this. And they just like got up and walked out of the theater and was like, this movie is a complete ripoff. You know, they're just reusing props from Alien. Like, this is such trash. Probably a better example of one I started using, but it's too blatant to even like talk over it, is the space station from Star Trek II. So if anybody's a big Trekkie, this space station's been used in like every Star Trek. It's got the big double doors where the spaceships fly in. It's the one that Excelsior, where Scotty sabotaged the doors so Excelsior couldn't get out, whatever. It actually first made the appearance in Star Trek Motion Picture, and people don't ever remember it from Star Trek the Motion Picture because it was a different alien space station, I think. And they needed a new one for Star Trek II, so they took the footage from Star Trek the Motion Picture and they inverted it. And that's how the mushroom top kind of design of that, it used to be the bottom, and then they flipped it over and reused it. And again, it became super iconic, and I don't hear too many people complaining about reusing that assets. So if you use assets, marketplace assets, to really pump up the core essence of your game and really support what you're doing, you know, people tend to not get grumpy about it. A great example of someone who did this really well is Gunpowder Games and game Maelstrom. This is an article that was published on UnrealEngine.com. If you Google Gunpowder Games Maelstrom Unreal Engine, you'll find the whole article about how they used marketplace assets to really build out the core of their game. Maelstrom is a kind of seafaring ship combat game with monsters, and they use a ton of assets for the water, the rocks, the buildings that are in the background, just a ton of different assets. But they actually use marketplace assets for a lot of their ships. And their ships are kind of the core visual unique identity of what makes that game. They've got this kind of pirate meets medieval kind of style of their ships. And so when they wanted to build out those ships and they wanted content for it, they didn't just go out and find, you know, pirate ship A on the marketplace and make that, you know, pirate ship A that you got. They went out and they got ship content, they got houses and huts and buildings and flags, and they pulled all that content together, and much like, you know, the old sci-fi builders of the 70s and 80s, they kit-bashed that into really cool, unique looking ships, and those were kind of the hero characters of their game. And so while they got a lot of reuse of assets, they got a lot of, you know, good use of their developers and their core art team building that content, nobody looks at Maelstrom and goes like, oh, that looks like an asset flip game, because their assets are still unique and they're still supporting the key vision of what they're trying to do. So that's a great reference to look up and read that article. And again, there was no kind of, you know, complaints about it or anything. They wanted to come out and actually express how they use these assets. So the example that I have for you today on the actual rapid prototyping part and some of the benefits of using these assets is called Parachess. And you'll probably figure out why it's called that here in a minute. So the setup for how I'm using marketplace assets to rapidly prototype is, as I mentioned, I've been a game designer for coming up on 20 years now, and I've always got those game design ideas percolating in my head. We've all got that perfect game that we've been working on. And one of these games I've been working on is a new turn-based strategy game. So it's a two-player multiplayer game. It is a symmetrical multiplayer game, so each team has exactly the same types of pieces. You play it on an 8x8 gridded board, so there's 64 tiles. And there are there's 6 different types of pieces. Each piece has a unique movement capability and unique attack capability. So some pieces can just move forward, some pieces can move forward and back, some can move diagonally, some can jump other pieces. And I've got all the game rules built out, and I built my prototype here in Unreal. And you can tell it's Unreal because the lighting's beautiful and the materials are awesome and it just looks great. And I've got all my gameplay, I've got my multiplayer, it's ready to rock and roll. And I really feel that this turn-based strategy game, oh, I forgot, the win condition is you fight against each other and you capture each other's pieces. And each team has a unique character that's kind of limited on their mobility, but it's called the king. And if you capture the other team's king, then you win the game. And that's basically the core concept. So I've got all this built out. And I firmly believe that this is going to revolutionize turn-based strategy gaming. And I figured out, I've got it to this point, I've done a lot of play testing, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be the esport in the future. In hundreds of years, Russia and the United States are going to be having world tournaments playing this game, and I just can feel it. But this is what I've got built so far, because I'm Christian Allen, I'm a game designer, right? Like, lighting looks pretty good, all the gameplay mechanics are there, I know it's going to work, but I've decided that I've got one of two kind of funding options. I can take this to a publisher and say, hey look, I'm going to go down to Disney and say, I've got this cool game, we'll just call it chess for right now. So we've got this chess game, and I think if we took the strength of the Disney IP characters and applied it to this chess game, just imagine how awesome all those Disney characters would look lined up. Maybe we have Disney princesses on one side and I don't know, Nemo characters on the other. So I'm going down to wherever Disney game headquarters is, and I'm pitching this game. And I'm talking about it, and I'm showing the pieces moving, and I'm doing all this stuff. And probably after about 5 minutes, even if these pieces are all animated and moving around, everybody's phone's going to come out. They're going to start looking down. They're going to stop paying attention, because it's not the most visual presentation in the world. So that's kind of option one. Option two is I'm going to crowdfund it. So I'm going to put out a sweet Kickstarter video. And we all know that gamers are just wowed by amazing core gameplay. So when they see a 10-minute presentation of me playing chess with someone on this board, they're going to get really excited. And they're going to be, that's awesome. I'll definitely pay $14.99 for that. Or I could go get some assets, and I could build something a little bit different. And what I've done here, excuse me, is built a little game. And this is a live demo, as you can see, with no audio, because the audio didn't go through. But I've actually built a little game called chess. So all the assets that you see here are all available for free on the Unreal Marketplace. So all the characters are out of our Paragon asset packs. And I've got skin variations of all these characters in. All the animations are all, again, available on the Marketplace. All the materials, the trees and the rocks and all that fun stuff are out of our kite demo. I've still got some little nods to Paragon. The Skybox is a blueprint pack that's available for free on the Marketplace called Good Sky, where you can do customizable skies. Excuse me. So, like I said, everything in here is good to go. I'm running at a pretty good frame rate, even though I've got a bunch of stuff open. And like I said, I have all my actual gameplay aspects in. So I've got characters moving around the board. I can run a little cheat and move some characters around. I can capture characters and kill them. And we got movement aspects, and we've got cool animations and all sorts of neat, fun stuff. So now when I'm actually making my presentation to the Disney executives or putting together my Kickstarter video, I've got a lot more to showcase. People can get an idea of the level of quality that I'm going for. I can say, hey, we've got these assets in. I can see I've got maybe a little bit of a snarky take, or a kind of a fun kind of thing going on. And I can use this to kind of present, a higher quality version of what I had before. Now, maybe I decide that I want to ship with these assets, or maybe I decide that, which I can, based on the licensing, if I ship in Unreal 4, or maybe I decide that I want to present that and use this as a demonstrator level of quality to be able to say, hey, when you give us the green light on using the Disney princesses for chess, we will build the Disney princesses to this quality level and swap them out, and this is the quality level you're going to do. One of the other things that I did is, because I'm like that, is I like to drop it in different environments. So because this is all built in blueprints, which I'll kind of run through. The individual board is just a blueprint. I can get a new environment like this Arctic base, which in its original presentation is a very moody kind of, every time I see it, I just think of the Thing. set in Antarctica. But it was a lot different than the original. This one I actually purchased off the marketplace, and I just used their demo map that came with the space. And now I've got, set my resolution, load up a different character set, and now I've got a Arctic environment. So got my characters in an Arctic environment, you know, different visuals. Looks like I'm taking a little bit more of a performance hit there, but that's all good knowledge. Can move characters around again. Everything works. But one of the things by doing this, one, I can, again, demonstrate, hey, look, you know, I built this cool turn-based strategy game. You know, imagine as I bring in different environments, you know, we could drop this into, you know, Nemo world. We could drop this into, you know, other different environments. I should probably stop using Disney as an example. Other branded environments that you want to have. But the other thing that I get from this is you know, I do start to get real world information from using these assets to prototype. So if this was an actual game that I was building, so just to be straight, I didn't actually invent chess. I just like Googled popular games, and it came up, and Wikipedia had all the rules. So I just copied those. Although in hindsight, I should have done para checkers, because chess is a lot more complicated than I expected. I probably would have got the same win out of actually doing checkers. But I start to learn real things when I'm prototyping with the assets. You can imagine when I'm, you know, moving those blocks around as a game designer, I can get everything I need from a pure game design perspective, out of using that block presentation of chess. You know, I get, okay, there's different pieces and they move around different ways, and I can see how people can play them and things like that. But things that I won't learn are actually production lessons. So there's a couple production lessons that you've actually seen so far. The first off is that it seems like a really cool idea that when you capture a piece, you know, one of the characters does a little bit of an emote. And you saw Seraph, the princess in the last one, doing a little spin thing, and she's got wings, and it looks awesome, and it's cool. And that one works pretty well, because it's about 4.5 seconds. You know, it's enough to capture your attention, but not too long to get really boring. Now, some of the actual emotes might be, you know, medium like that, or some of them might be a little bit short, like these pawns might tend to be a little short, because they come in, okay, like I said, might tend to be a little short. They come in about 3/4 a second, which is not enough time to process what's even going on. So as the opposing player, if you're watching that and you have this pawn, you know, capture a piece, and it only takes a few seconds, then you don't have enough time to process what's going on. One of the other characters, I think Boris has a pretty short one. That's a good amount, 3.5 seconds. Trying to see if any of the characters have like a super long one here. I think his might be pretty long. They're randomized, so they play different ones. Yeah, so that one's pretty good. Quang, who's one of the other character sets, he has a 9.5 second animation where he sits and prays, completely motionless for 9.5 seconds. That was way, way, way too long, especially for a completely static character. I mean, he looks super cool, and the very first time he does it, it's really cool. But of course, you know, as a chess player, having to wait 9.5 seconds until you're allowed to do your next thing is way too long. So I've learned that about 3.5 seconds is a good amount of time, and then I've learned that in multiplayer, I can pad that out a little bit. Because it's asynchronous, players don't necessarily need to see exactly the same thing. So if one player decides to skip it and start planning their next move, I can kind of cue that up. So that's one thing that I learned. Another thing is that if I capture this piece right here, so I'm going to take this bishop and I'm going to capture this queen. And you'll notice, as you've seen a few times, I do a camera swap, I play a cool effect. And everything, you know, looks super cool. His is a little bit long. But one of the things that I found in doing that, one of the first things I ran into is when you have a lot of characters adjacent to each other like this, is I would end up with characters blocking each other's camera. So if I just, let me move this character over here, see if I can actually get it one that's in a spot that would be blocked. Let's see what that one does. Yeah, so right here. So actually in this space right here, if I look back to where he was right here, she is standing right where that camera was. So if I hadn't done anything, when that camera focused on that other character, all you would actually see is the back of her head. So everybody would doing animations, you see the back of her head, and she gets in the way. And so what I do is that when I move those cameras around and do those kills, basically if there's a character in the adjacent spot, when that camera is doing its transition, I actually hide that character. I just make them transparent so you can't see the skeletal mesh. And then as the camera's transitioning back, they unhide, and nobody actually, until I call it out, ever actually notices that the character in front of the other characters is hidden. But it's one of those things that you wouldn't notice in gameplay prototyping if you're using, again, a bunch of those blocks. One, you probably wouldn't have done a camera swap, because doing a camera swap to see a block replace another block isn't that exciting. Two, you're not going to have any animations because they're a block, blah, 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 blah. So you might not run into those kind of situations until you get farther into development and have to deal with that in a production setting. The other thing that you're going to win using these kinds of assets is in prototyping is just from a quality level. One, you can, I really recommend that folks, look at these kinds of assets as benchmarks for their team. One of the things, the old school way of doing it, right, is we gray box everything. We build everything in gray box, we play test it, we play test it, we tweak it until it gets to where we want it to be, and then we're like, sweet, the game's awesome, now let's add art, right? So your environment team starts making environment art, and your character team starts making characters, and then a few months down the line, it's like, now all that art's coming online, let's put it all in the game, and now we run it 7 frames a second on our target platform. So now let's start stripping everything back out, let's start turning off effects, let's start lowering our LODs, let's doing all that, and you're in this circle loop. Now, for some people, that's just totally fine. But if you start with an asset that has the number of animations that you plan to have at the resolution of the materials that you plan to have, has the LODs built in that you plan to have, like if I actually go into Twin Blast here, now that we have auto LOD generation, which just released in 4.2.2 for skeletal meshes, I can go in and actually look at the different LOD quality. I can see what the different settings are for 2, 3, and 4. I can agree that we can, as a team, very early on go like, okay, you know what? For PC, this is our LOD 0. This is what we're doing. For Switch, we're going to go ahead and choose LOD 2. That's going to be our level of detail that we're going to put out. So let's plan on doing that. We've got all the numbers for the skeletal mesh. We can literally, our art team, we can use this character as a placeholder for our main character. Maybe we're saying, okay, for our, hero third-person shooter character, we're going to use Rampage. And he or she, whatever Rampage is, this is going to be our main character. This is going to be our hero level character, and Twin Blast is going to be representative of our enemies, which might be a lower resolution, so we can set all those. And then essentially the art team can just build to that quality level, and then ideally just swap those assets out. So you're not running into a situation where you've got 30 enemies on screen, everything's awesome when it looks like super hot, but then you want to bring in a bunch of new characters, and now all of a sudden your engineer goes, well, at that level you can have 3 characters on screen. So now you just need to adjust that chess gameplay to just only ever have 3 characters on screen at any one time. And you're like, well, that kind of ruins chess. And they're like, well, that's the decisions you made. So you got to pump it down from those 18 characters down to 3. Go. So those are some of the big benefits that you get from using those kinds of assets. Let's see what kind of time I have. I've got about 6 more minutes. So the other thing I just wanted to quickly touch on is blueprints and the capability of using blueprints again in prototyping and in development. So again, with a blueprint, if you're not familiar with blueprints are the visual scripting language that Unreal Engine uses. It runs on top of C++. So anybody like me that's a game designer can go in and access most of the engine and can build and prototype really cool things. They can also do things that are extremely dangerous. But again, when you're prototyping and building with those real assets in your blueprints, you start running into those those gameplay things that you might need to deal with. And that starts to inform you about how complex your blueprints need to be, what kind of work you need to be. A great example is, this is the blueprint sequence for the captures on the tiles. And one of the interesting things about Parachess, one of the reasons I could build this on my own in 2 weeks, besides having a bunch of AAA assets off the marketplace, is that nothing actually moves in Parachess. There's actually 64 individual tiles that all look like this. They've got a skeletal mesh with a cube, and the move effect and the death effect are attached to the actual blueprint. And when characters are moved around, it plays effects, it hides skeletal meshes, it changes skeletal meshes, and it does all that through the board blueprint, which is over here, that contains all the actual chess logic, which again, I wish I had done checkers, because chess logic keeps going. There's more chess logic. And then over here we have the king logic. That's even more, and next actually I have to build all the logic for the threats to the king where the king not actually is. So again, checkers would have been a lot faster and easier. But as you're moving through those various different things as you're prototyping them, oh, now I lost my spot. Where was I? Down here. So this is the logic for the attack sequence, and the logic, basically we do a camera switch in this block, we play the death animation and the effect, we play a effect for the new character coming in, play the little dance, and then this is the block for actually hiding the skeletal mesh of the adjacent characters. So essentially I have an array of tiles, I do a check to see if there's a character occupying the piece behind the target, and then I basically just hide them during that sequence. And at the very end, when I do my cleanup, I unhide them. So nice, simple little block, relatively easy to do. But again, by using those assets and having those things built into my blueprints as I'm going forward, again, all those the computation and all the things that are going on, that's in my prototype. So I'm not adding additional features as new content comes online. Hopefully I'm just swapping that content out. So with that, getting close to time to have enough for Q&A. Yeah, I did talk about the LOD content. Oh, the last thing I wanted to talk about was utilizing existing blueprints. So I'm going to go back over here to the test environment. And I mentioned that everything that you saw in the scene was free. And one of those is, let's go with set 3. I already did set 3, that's okay. Set the resolution. One of those is the Good Sky pack. So when I originally built this, I just used the default lighting skybox that comes with Unreal. It's just a bright blue noon sky. And we actually, we sponsored this pack. I think this one actually is free in perpetuity. It was really popular. And what Good Sky is a blueprint-based customizable skybox system. So here I've chosen the Night Storm pack, just because I think it looks cool. But if I go in here and actually select the blueprint, and I'll actually look up at the sky, I can go ahead and change that from Midnight Storm to Sunrise. I should probably turn off the storm if I'm doing that. We'll put it on default. Sun, stars. I can change the types of clouds. I can change it to noon, which changes the base lighting. If I tag in my lighting system with this, I can have the shadows react to it. I can choose time of day. So I can go in and do enable time of day. And then let's see, crank, how long is a day? 0.01. Let's see if this actually works. And is it changing? It might be changing. Anyway. You can do actually real-time time of day settings, things like that. And this is all contained in a blueprint that comes with the package. So when you purchase and download a marketplace assets that built in blueprints, you get access to obviously all the blueprints that it was built in. So if I was developing my sweet third-person action platformer, featuring German plumber, super original idea. And I just didn't have time to build a bunch of skyboxes. I could go out and purchase that skybox pack, and I could just use the skyboxes as is, like ship with it. And 90% of the time, nobody's going to really notice that, hey, my sunset one is this pack. So where was I? Oh. Sky preset. So if I set it to snow mode or dark sky, whatever I want to do. But I also then can use that blueprint framework to build my own customizable skybox system. So I can have my artists come in, build a bunch of skyboxes that fit within my fantastical, post-dystopian future Germany, after the nuclear ant war, and have all those customizable scenes. I can use that framework that might not necessarily, maybe I'm not actually utilizing custom skyboxes in each of my spaces. Maybe I only have set spaces, but then that gives a tool set to the environment artists that they can just go through and choose the ones they want. They're not actually physically placing them all. The blueprint handles all the placement and construction script and things like that. So I'm using that tool set to put in my own content, and then I might be able to take that blueprint setup and these variables here that I can accept, and I can add things to it. Do I want to add rain as an option, and I want to have a material effect with rain? I can add it into this blueprint and have this, again, as the environment artist can just affect this one blueprint, have all that content in, and maybe they can switch between rain and snow and whatever they want to do. So I can expand that. So it is really good for out-of-the-box use, but this kind of content, blueprint content specifically, is really expandable and can be used for a lot of different things in game development. I highly encourage you, especially if you're an indie developer or a smaller team, go out and take a look at the content. Even as an indie developer, it can be a really good learning experience. I've learned a lot from marketplace content that I've purchased for less than $100 to see, oh, here's a radial inventory menu, and I'm interested in how that's built. So I'm actually I'll spend the $60 and go in there and actually see how it was built in Blueprint, and check it out, and maybe I can use that learning to other things down the future. So there's a lot of win for using those kinds of assets in prototyping. Things I covered, obviously budgeting and performance are a huge thing. Project planning, timing, things like that. And then again, learning real-world game design implications of prototyping with shippable content that you're not necessarily going to use in the gray box environment. So with that, we're right at 2:45. I've got probably about 7 minutes if there's any Q&A that we want to do before we have to clear the room or for the next speaker. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. Thanks for coming, and open it for Q&A. We can clap, too, whichever way you want to do it. So, who has the first Q&A? Sure.
I'm going to give you a mic.
Oh, we got mics.
Can you sell music on the marketplace?
Yes. Yes, you can. In fact, if I had audio, the music pack that I have in here is called, let's see, let me go to my content browser. I go here, content browser. It is called Fantasy RPG Music Pack, and it comes with a full set of sound cues. It also has the original waves. The other one that you see in this pack is actually after I purchased the Fantasy RPG Music Pack, we also sponsored another pack called Fantasy Orchestral Pack, which again has all the cues. So the only requirement to sell it on the Unreal Marketplace is that it's formatted properly to use in the Unreal Engine. And so what that means is that in the case of audio, we've got our audio, these are our original WAV files imported into the engine. That stays with the content, and then essentially you use our audio system to build the individual sound cues, which is what we call the individual sound bites. So these are music. If you're doing things like effects and things like that, you're obviously going to have it cut up into a lot more pieces. So yeah, short answer, yes. Now, the one thing I should note on that specifically, it's not just specific to music, but the one thing that you cannot do with marketplace content is buy a content pack, download it, rip it up, and then re-upload it into your own content pack to sell on the marketplace. You can ship it in your games, you can ship it in your products, your TV shows, whatever you want to do, but you can't resell it on our marketplace or another marketplace. And that's hopefully pretty self-explanatory of why we don't let people do that. In the back? Oh, we got to do the mic, so it's recorded.
So we can all hear your question.
Got to do the mic. I missed the first half of the lecture, so forgive me if you maybe went over this, but...
No, get out.
Sorry, okay. How customizable, because you mentioned all this is like you can use it straight out of the box, it's this blueprint program. How customizable are all the pieces? Let's say like the night sky wanted 1.5 times as many stars, or the noon I wanted a little bit different color blue, or how customizable is that?
So, I mean, like for example, these pieces of content, these are, altogether the characters and the assets that were released in Paragon cost about $17 million to develop. They're AAA level assets, so they have everything built in for their specific characters. There's also a bunch of variations of the different characters, but you have access to the actual source, the source stuff. So I can actually open up the material slots and see, okay, this is element 2, and I'm not an artist, so now I'm getting crazy here. Oh, this is the material. I want to open that up. Maybe. Oh, it's opening in my content browser. Where'd my content browser go? I'm so used to one screen. There we go. So I can go in here and find the original texture and open that up. And then, my texture artist can go through and start editing this and changing it and doing whatever I want to it. So from a licensing perspective, you can change it as much as you want. You can hack it apart. You could just use the skeleton. You could say, hey, I really like the way this is rigged. I'm just going to use the skeleton, build my new character right on top of that skeleton. You could just use the animations and go, you know what, wow, this character is built like my main character, but my character is made out of something different, but he's built like that, so I'm going to use that skeleton, put my character on him. And that might be really helpful. If you're not a rigger, and you don't have that skill set on your team, which a lot of us don't, being able to, you might have a character artist that's really awesome, build a character, and you might, have a material artist, but you might not have the rigger. So being able to take that and put it on an existing skeleton might save you a lot of time. So a lot of it's really about creativity. Now there is going to be some work in, understanding how things are set up and going and built in, and remembering that, especially like with some of these assets, the Paragon assets specifically, they're built for a production environment. So they're not built as like tutorial assets, where something that you purchase off the marketplace that might be like a modular RPG inventory kit that is actually built to be modular, right? Like that's part of the thing, is that you buy this thing in order to customize it for yourself. Like that's the whole point of it. So usually they're going to be more, things are really exposed in blueprints, and they're designed for that. So that's something to think about when you're getting the assets. But again, the nice thing, one of the things I talked about early on, for Unreal Marketplace and the Unity Asset Store versus something on TurboSquid, you're getting something that's designed for, and at least in Unreal, curated for the engine that you're using in the Unreal Marketplace. Whereas, you see something on TurboSquid and you're like, sweet, that tiger looks awesome, it would look great in my zoo. Oh wait, that tiger has more tries than my entire zoo level. Oh, well, I just spent $200 on this tiger and I can't really use it in anything except for the cover of the game. It's completely useless to me. So,
cool. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? I've got the mic.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you very much. Again, this is my contact information at Cerealin. If you tweet at me, especially if you took a picture of me, if you tweet at me today, I'll try to maybe send you some swag or something. LinkedIn, Christian Allen Designer. That's where I do most of my connections. If you want to direct message me, if you're interested in shipping indie games using the Unreal Engine, if you're interested in getting your game on the Epic's Game Store, if you're interested interested in the Epic Mega Grants program, if you're looking for funding for your game or your 3D awesome thing, feel free to reach out, and I can help you connect to the correct dots. So again, thanks very much for your time. You guys have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Fantastic.